The Wizard Returns, Chapter 12. The fairies bustled about, wrapping him in soft robes, rubbing dry his hair until he batted their hands away with irritation. They tried to dress him, but he turned his back to them and put his clothes on with as much dignity as he could muster. He was acutely conscious of the king's amused gaze. A fairy brought him a mirror and a comb, and as he tidied his hair as best he could, he saw that the face in the mirror was his own, his real face. Pete's disguise had melted painlessly away. Another fairy offered him a glass of something hot and steaming. The surface of the liquid appeared to be glowing from within. "What is that?" he asked, eyeing it dubiously. "Sunfruit schnapps," the fairy said cheerfully. The wizard took a cautious sip, and the fiery liquid slipped down his throat, setting him to cough fiercely. But as soon as the warm glow filled his stomach, and he found he didn't mind the burn nearly as much as another few sips. The fairies tittered as he chugged down the rest of the liquor, and he waved his cup around, which magically filled itself. "You have made your choice," the Fairy King said, and the excited buzz of the fairies fell silent at once. "I have," the wizard said. The Fairy King smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We do not give, wizard, without asking something in return. We have given you back yourself. We have offered you the power of Oz itself. And now we will ask of you a tiny favor before you devote yourself to the glory of Oz." Again, it was almost as if though the fairies were making fun of him, the wizard thought, his mind racing. Pete had been infuriating, but the wizard had never doubted him as much as he cared about Oz. The fairies seemed different, though. The voice in the pool had said they were corrupt and weak. Was it possible they were trying to trick him? Was Pete working for them? Or being used by them? The wizard narrowed his eyes. "Describe this favor. Long ago, you gave 3 gifts to 3 children of Oz, all of whom asked you for something they lacked. This much, I assume you remember now?" "The Cowardly Lion," the wizard said slowly. "The Scarecrow. The Tin Woodman. But that was nothing. Those gifts weren't even real. I had no power then." "Indeed, you thought nothing of answering their pleas, knowing that the magic they believed you had was nothing but an illusion. But what if I told you the illusion itself was a lie?" "I don't understand," the wizard said helplessly. I never had magic before now. I don't even know what happened back there with the lion. It's out of my control." "The journey from the other place transforms your kind. It's in a way we don't understand yet," the Fairy King said. "In the crossing, you became something more, and perhaps something less than what you were once. Like Dorothy, you had no magic in your world. Like Dorothy, Oz had altered you. You have had the power of Oz at your disposal all this time, wizard. When you created the 3 gifts, the lion's courage, the Tin Woodman's heart, the Scarecrow's brain, you thought you were only offering them some kind of Plancinia. But there was a real magic, old magic in those gifts. And when those from the other place make that discovery, it often leads them down a path of perversion and abuse. Make no mistake, wizard, the magic of Oz is our magic, the magic of the fairies. And we want those gifts back. The corruption of the lion, the Scarecrow, and the Tin Woodman is on your shoulders. You must bring back to us what is not yours to give." "You want the gifts back?" the wizard asked, his mind whirling. "But why?" The king rose from his throne, fierce and imperious. "The doings of my people are no business of yours, wizard. The magic of Oz is ours to keep safe, ours to protect. You have let loose something that must be stopped, and it is up to you to make the amends. The pool offered you a choice, and you chose Oz. Do not challenge Oz's rightful rulers." "Look," the wizard said crossly, "I went through kind of a lot to get here. Pete said you could help me, and now you're asking me to get off on some crazy quest. Is he one of you?" The fairies stirred restlessly, and the Fairy King looked almost shiftly. "Is that what he told you?" "He didn't tell me anything," the wizard said, "except that you had a key to my memories, and that I'd be tested. A test I just passed. I'm not helping you until you tell me who Pete is and why you sent him to me in the first place." The Fairy King considered the question, his eyes half-lidded before he answered. "Pete is one of us, in a way," he said finally. "We have been waiting a long time, wizard, to see if you might be able to help Oz with your—" The king paused delicately, and then someone behind him snickered. "Powers." "What do you mean, you waited? You know I was in that field for 25 years?" The king didn't answer, and then the worst thought all occurred to him. Someone sent that storm to keep me in Oz. Someone with real magic. That was you, wasn't it? The fairy was silent, but his expressions gave him away. The wizard felt fury rise in his chest. The fairies had been using him all along, and for longer than he even imagined. They left him in that field until they thought he might be useful, and they would have continued to leave him there forever if he wasn't. And if the king lied about that, no doubt he was lying about the gifts, lying about protecting Oz. He wanted the gifts for himself. But to what end? Did the fairies want to restore Ozma to the throne, when the pool itself had told them they were corrupt? Was the Fairy King imagining himself on the throne in the Emerald Palace? The wizard schooled his features, keeping his expression neutral. He couldn't let the Fairy King guess that he knew there were more to the fairy demands than simply the well-being of Oz. And suddenly, he was angry again, like hadn't been since he faced the lion. The voice in the pool had made him believe he could be good again, but the lying pack of fairies was only out for themselves. Why should he be selfless when no one else in Oz is? What did he care about their petty power plays? Who was to say that Ozma was any better? Maybe anyone who rules Oz is destined to put themselves first, he thought bitterly. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's this place, and now I'm stuck here. Ozma had tricked him in the pool, tricked him into believing in the possibility of his own goodness. And what felt good about being good? He squashed down the thought of Iris. After all, even she had been trying in her own way to stab him in the back. No, the only thing that felt good was power. He had power once, and now he wanted it back. "We felt you had more to do in Oz," the Fairy King said, smoothly interrupting his thoughts. "Bringing your balloon down was not the most graceful way to keep you here, and for that I apologize." The king coughed, and the wizard noted how difficult it was for him as much to admit the slightest wrongdoing. Even if he was doing it in a sweet talk the wizard into doing his bidding. "I hope you can forgive us. Sometimes, when the good of Oz is concerned, The Fairy King looked as though he was about to bring up a hairball. "We can, make mistakes. Not that that happens often, of course," he added hastily. The wizard drew himself up to his full height, which was admittedly not very tall. "I accept your apology," he lied, "and I accept your task. I will not fail. Do not forget that I did rule Oz, and well." "Well is not precisely the word I would have used," the Fairy King said, laughing. "But I have no doubt you will do your earnest best on our behalf. I offer you a token, and a reminder of our esteem." The Fairy King bent forward and scooped up a palmful of water from the dark pool. He took his palm away, and the glob of water floated there. With both hands, he pinched and shaped it, drawing it into an ebony cane. When it was finished, he presented it to the wizard with a flourish. "Do not forget us," he said lightly. "We will be watching you, wizard. Of that you can be certain." "I have no doubt," the wizard said coolly. "But I have no need of your gifts." "I insist," the king said coldly, holding it out. The wizard hesitated, and then accepted the cane. He tapped it experimentally against the ground, as if it was as solid as an ordinary cane, though the wood was shot through with an obsidian slickness that echoed the water of the pool. As he looked at it, an eye opened in the dark wood and blinked at him before disappearing again. This is how they would watch him. He would have to be very careful indeed. He had no doubt that if he found a way to get rid of the cane, they would punish him for somehow. Now was not the time to defy them. No, he waited until the moment was right. "Then we are agreed," the Fairy King said, and the wizard smiled, matching the king's oily grin with one of his own. But of course, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the fairy's face before vanishing again, and the wizard smiled to himself in triumph. "Not so sure of yourself now, are you?" he thought. "Then let us celebrate," the Fairy King said, "and afterward we shall return you to the world above to begin your most noble quest." He clapped his hands, and a parade of extraordinary creatures, lithe, beautiful girls with the bodies of human women and the heads of a deer, A fat little troll in an ear-me coat, far too big for him. A frog the size of a man dressed in a tuxedo with tails, capered into the throne room, bearing platters of steaming dishes and a host of folding tables. Wine poured itself from floating bottles into heavy goblets of silver and gold that settled themselves into trays, to be whisked about by mournful-looking spectres, as institutionable as mist. As the wizard saw when a fairy walked right through one of them, snatching up a wine-glass as the ghostly waiter dissolved and then reformed. The king himself served the wizard a heaping portion of roast venison on a white china plate, and drew up a folding table and a comfortable little chair before returning to his throne with a plate of his own. And though the room was full of merriment, fairies chatting, gossiping, exclaiming over this delicacy and that, they all ignored the wizard as completely as if he were invisible, so that a miserable sense of loneliness punctured the feast and turned the taste of meat to ashes in his mouth. "I had better be going," he said aloud. No one paid him any attention as he pushed away the table and got up. Without his even reaching for it, the cane found its way to his hand. A dull, shabby corridor that bore a resemblance to the one that he had led to this awful room opened up in the small wall before him, and as he stumbled down to it, the sunfruit schnapps churned in his belly, and he wondered if he was going to be sick. As he left, the fairies' laughter echoed behind him, high-pitched and cruel, and it rang down the hallway after him for a long time.